Most people don't know that they're living in survival mode. How do you know that you're living in survival mode? You feel like something's missing. You feel like maybe you got to the top and you realize that it's lonely there. You know, have it all together when you're at work, but then you come home and close the door and you're absolutely miserable. You have a sense that like, yeah, I do not live in wholeness. I do not live in peace. I do not live in integration and repetition. That's where we start to really wake up. We're like, oh my gosh, why do I keep dating the same unavailable person? Or why do I, keep reenacting this thing with my child? And people can just stay stuck there instead of looking at their partner as a mirror and say, wow, what is the pattern here that I'm meant to see like break up? Collapse actually comes after that. Chaos and collapse are always part of the process of transformation. Trauma is a catalyst for growth and transformation. There is meaning in pain. That pain will actually lead you to a deeper truth or a different part of yourself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Consciousness Hub podcast. My name's Michelle, and my guest today is Dr. Nicole Dolan. She's a depth psychologist who blends clinical training with the holistic support of the soul she's treating, not the symptoms. And her work is described as the sacred meeting the scientific. Welcome, Dr. Dolan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I know I'm going to learn a lot from everything you have to say. Can you please tell us more about yourself and about depth psychology and why you decided to develop your practice in this particular field?
So I am what's called a depth psychologist, which most people have not even heard of. They're like, what does that mean? It is the work of Carl Jung. So a lot of psychology where people start studying is back to Freud, but Carl Jung actually took a different angle, you could say. And that's just saying it very lightly. But how I like to describe depth psychology as different than other therapies is that instead of looking at symptoms such as depression, anxiety, right? And saying, how do we eradicate these? How do we minimize these symptoms and get rid of them? Instead, we look at these symptoms and we say, well, what is their meaning? What does the soul want? What's happening in this person's life that's asking to be seen, heard, to transform? And so we take a depth approach to that. There's much more that goes into it. We're very focused on working with the unconscious, right? So parts of self that people have split off from and do not have access to, but show up in patterns in their lives where they're like, why do I keep doing this thing? Or like, I know that I'm supposed to, do this differently, or I'm supposed to be dating a different type of person, but you continuously go through these same patterns. Depth psychology can help kind of reach in and deal with like, okay, well, what's not conscious? What's split off from consciousness? And so we're really focused on that as opposed to a lot of other therapies where it's like, okay, let's talk about, what happened today and give you, tools. We give tools as well, but there's a deeper dive into the meaning of your story with depth psychology.
Right. I think that's really important. And I love that. What does the soul want? What does it mean to you to treat the soul, and how does that look in your practice? Because it's a whole different conversation when you ask, what does the soul want compared to what's wrong or what ails you?
I appreciate that question because I do feel like there's so much out there that says like mind, body, soul, right? And it's like, well, what does that mean? How do you actually work with the soul? Right? And so one of the ways I was just speaking about is patterning. I'm somebody who personally likes to track nervous system imprinting. and pay attention to, say, the things that happened in the beginning of your life and how that imprinting and those patterns exist in your nervous system today. And also dig into the meaning of that. So like people might look at that and say like, okay, so this thing happened when I was younger. I had this, adverse experience. And sometimes it's as young as birth, right? And they may look at that and say, okay, well, how do I heal that? Or how do I make that go away? Or even, am I stuck there forever? And the answer is no, but it is part of your path. It is part of who you are, and it is still showing up in your body and how you're showing up today, usually in your relationships, but also with your relationship with yourself. So I'm really into looking into patterns. I do that work in the very beginning when I start working with somebody. It's like, okay, let's go through your history with the intention of understanding what has been threading through your story the entire time. And therefore, there's meaning in that. When you see patterns, you start to, and so here's where soul comes in, you start to see why you came here. You start to see more of your purpose, more of who you truly are. It's kind of like all of the information that you need to understand or feel into yourself as a soul is within your nervous system, it's within your body, and it's within your story. So looking into those patterns, understanding how to look into that deeply, certainly over time. I mean, I'm an intuitive person, but over time, I've also developed that intentionally. And so I believe that that's a way we can work with soul too, is really trusting that whatever it is that we are gathering as information as practitioners, if we're practicing in that way, is coming from soul. I'll add to that and say a very Jungian way of working with soul is working with dreams, paying attention to people's dreams, or like we said before, things that are happening in the unconscious or things that are happening in the body, and trusting that there's deep meaning there. So lots of ways to work with soul, but I think that's how I'll answer that for now.
Yes, that's lovely. Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you've called the nervous system a spiritual organ as well, like bringing, kind of like bridging that between body and soul. The nervous system is a spiritual organ, and you describe trauma responses as sacred intelligence. Could you tell us more about what brought you to these realizations and how your personal explorations of consciousness have shaped your practice?
So my own journey as a therapist has been, as you asked, like, how does your consciousness change over time and how has this looked for you? I think where I started to really pay attention to the deeper spiritual component of therapy. I mean, it feels kind of silly to say that now because I'm like, well, everything is spiritual, but in a different state of consciousness, when I started paying attention and I said, how come we don't bring spirituality into the room? It was one of my first experiences was learning that our clients are mirroring back to us our own consciousness, right? Because everything that's in me is going to show up outside of me and mirror back to me. And at the time, I had my own healing work to do. I still have, we're always healing. We always have work to do, but I had work to do that was very unconscious. I had trauma work to do specifically. And the clients that were showing up in front of me all held the same trauma that I was holding within my system. So
Mm.
that's just one example of kind of the beginning of that cracking open for me and just really feeling like, yeah, there's so much more happening here than we give credit for, or than most therapists show up in the room thinking initially, right? So that's one example of just kind of the beginning of that consciousness. And then I would say over time, I developed as a depth psychologist. I was trained in this from the beginning, by the way. A lot of people are kind of like, how did you go from being, maybe a CBT therapist to depth psychology? I didn't. I started right at the root of like, teach me how to work intuitively. So
Mhm.
this is very natural to me as well. It's a home for me. But of course, my own consciousness developed over time. And so I developed as a depth psychologist, and then I became a mother. And I became a mother of a child with high dysregulation, anxiety, and needs. So my oldest is, if we wanted to put her in labels, which sometimes I struggle with labels for multiple reasons, but this reason also, I don't think that you can peg this kid. But we would say that she's on the autism spectrum. We would say that she's PDA, for anybody who knows what that means. And we would say that she has like sensory processing issues. And the reason that this is important to understand is because I had to learn so much about the nervous system from my child. And so over time, I started learning that, like, yes, like the very scientific reality of the neurobiology of her system, and like how she needs to, be able to create more capacity in order to regulate. That's very scientific, right? But I also started learning that this is a very spiritual journey. I mean, this is a very intuitive child, first off. I mean, my daughter has been, I've been told before, and also told by her, that she was a doctor in a past life. And so my daughter often you'll just find her doing surgery. That's like what she does. She's done it since she was about 1.5. She just does surgery on patients. So it was a very spiritual journey. She knew I was pregnant, like when I hadn't told anyone. Like, she was just a very intuitive being. And so over time, working with her also has shifted my consciousness, but it's also brought me into understanding. So there's a big narrative right now going around, which is really wonderful, right? Which is, come home to yourself, be yourself, come into your becoming and who you are. And I say, okay, but you have to understand where you split, where you fragmented, before you can get to the place of remembering who you are. And this is all important, and comes into this consciousness question and the nervous system as a spiritual organ, because that process of becoming whole, that process of coming back into reintegration and knowing who you are, requires coming into wholeness and stretching your capacity for wholeness. And so I've realized that it's like, while we're also doing this work to create capacity in order to come from fragmentation into reintegration, it's also the work that your nervous system does physically in order to move through dysregulation or, anxiety, or whatever it is that you're challenged with in your body. So there's many ways that this has come through for me, but I hold both now. Where I once held like a very soul-led journey of the client, the psyche, and I still do, I now also have this very deep understanding from a neurological perspective of the nervous system. And I trust now that the nervous system houses everything. It's kind of like Akashic records. It's all in here. All of the answers are right here.
That's really powerful to me, that it's your daughter that kind of deepened everything for you. I agree with you. I think our children teach us so much, and I've been so lucky, to have the kids that I have, and to be able to spend time with my sister's daughters too. And I really do think they have so much to show us about ourselves. And that's something that you've spoken about too. You said that motherhood is a type of soul contract, and that our children are the perfect mirrors to show us what we need to heal in ourselves. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe why sometimes some of our children arrive with the challenges that they do arrive with?
Yeah. So, and definitely my daughter is extraordinarily challenging, right? So like, even the experience of like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, she's such a wonderful teacher. It's like, yeah, but it's been hard. It's been hard. And yes, so much of this is not my original idea. In fact, Dr. Shefali's work is around conscious parenting, and I've always really appreciated this idea. But I went into exploring it from a nervous system perspective, with a spiritual perspective as well. And also just holding my own layers to it, right? But basically the notion is this, is that when your child is having a difficult moment in their lives, whatever it is, it might be dysregulation. That's my life, right? Like when my kid's having a meltdown, what does it do inside of me? But if you have a child that doesn't have meltdowns, maybe your child went through something at 13 that you went through, right? Whatever it was, it's whenever your child goes through something that is significant enough that it activates your own system, your own body, they're bringing something up in you that's being asked to heal. So in that way, your child is mirroring you and they're mirroring your nervous system. But even more so, we reenact all kinds of patterns. What came to mind when you first asked that question was I really actually just saw a lot of imagery just in my own life and in my own story. And I can share that with my daughter, even though I swore like I would never create, the exact circumstances that I was raised in, right? I unconsciously did. So
I know what you mean.
in my life that was having very loud, meltdowns that were very difficult for me. And as a mother, I had to do that healing. I had to start really uncovering that in my system and my body because I was getting really triggered when my kid was having these issues. I also had, certain parental experiences that I started kind of like resetting up. We moved and my husband had to start traveling for work. And now I'm alone with these children and going through these experiences. And anyways, it was just a perfect replica of like, oh yeah, my dad traveled for work and my mom had to raise us. And one of the kids was acting this thing out. And, and so it's really for me, when I hold and look at that, it's like they are our greatest teachers, right? Like they are asking us to look at the parts of ourselves that we have left behind, the parts that we have cut off from, and we have just said like, okay, I'm no longer part of that story. Maybe you moved away from mom and dad when you were 18 and never turned around, right? These kids will bring up in you whatever it is that needs to heal. So to speak to the other part of your question, when you said, why do kids come in like this? That's a very big question. I don't want to pretend that I know the answer. But I will say that, I think there's different soul missions that these kids have, obviously. But kids like mine, I feel like because that's where obviously like my studies are going right now. These children that are on the spectrum, these children that are having major dysregulation, these children that are not fitting in systems, they've come here to change systems, right? So our generation, a lot of people really identify with this, we're cycle breakers, right? We're going to break the cycle. I'm sure you've heard that.
Yeah.
And these children, they're not here to do that. They're here to build the new systems. So they're very unique and interesting in that way. They do not conform. They do not fit in the boxes that we were asked to step into ourselves. So they're not like conditioned like we are. They're not conditionable. And so they're very hard to raise, right? They're really hard to raise because in our, day, it was like you were, some people were afraid of their parents, right? Or they just knew like to listen if they were supposed to, but these kids, they don't conform. And they break rules and they make new ones. Split that is within us that we're talking about, the split, what's unconscious in us that needs to become conscious in order to be reintegrated. So now I was going to take it as far as to say like the split between like the old and the new way of being, right? The old earth and the new earth. They live very differently from how we ever did. And even though that's really beautiful and wonderful, it's very hard to raise them on this planet.
Right. Because they feel so uncomfortable here. It's painful for them to go through a normal day here. and as their parent, you want to do everything that you can to make things more comfortable. And so it's a struggle for everybody in that situation when you have a sensitive child and they need things to be a certain way for them to feel okay. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that you need to have more patience. You need to learn how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
um, and it changes everything about how you see yourself as well. And I think it actually made me more compassionate towards my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because seeing some of the, like, you exactly what you said, like the patterns that you somehow repeat without ever thinking that you would repeat the same the same patterns that you lived through. And maybe it's not exactly it doesn't look exactly the same, but the effect is similar or the same. And
Right.
it definitely gave me like a different way to see my relationship with my mom and dad. And of course, it's because of my kids and
Mm-hmm.
and how they've let me see through their eyes a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I was going to say is these kids are so fascinating too, in the sense that like, so they trigger things in us, they bring it up in our own nervous system. They make us look at, ideally, if you're consciously parenting or you're being intentional, right? Then you're going to look at yourself and say like, okay, what's getting activated in me right now? What's happening in me when my child's getting left out? Right? Or
Mhm,
what's happening in me when my child's having a panic attack, or what's
mhm,
happening if whatever it is. There's so many experiences and circumstances that our children go through that cause us pain. And so
mhm,
when we reach into those pain points, it is an invitation for us to do healing work. But what I was going to say is what's really fascinating, and I mean, this has been my experience so far at least, is we're also projecting our experiences onto those children. And so like we are imagining that like they feel abandoned or they feel the same way we did in the fourth grade when we got left out or whatever it is, right? And
mhm,
the interesting thing about them, I don't know if this is your experience too, but I will say at least for me, the interesting thing is like it's like they're not here. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about like they're here to build new systems, right? They're not the cycle breakers. We're the cycle breakers. They're the ones building the new systems. And of course, there's, overlap in there, but they aren't taking on the same traumatic imprints that we did. I guess I could say it that way.
mhm. Right, do you think they're more resilient?
I don't know if it's that they're more resilient or if it's that our generation, like we really are, so many of us really are raising our consciousness. Like we really are doing the work to clear the debris, not only in our own lives, but all of the shit that we carry from our ancestors,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
From who knows when. So,
right.
and that's why I think they're such an interesting generation. Like they really are the generation of what's coming, and they're like the pioneers of it. And so the world is really hard for them because
Mhm.
they're made to create a world that doesn't exist yet. Right? I don't know. I mean, I feel like so many parents can resonate with this. I know I can. I'm at least speaking
Yeah,
for myself here, where I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh, I know what my daughter needs. I know what she needs
yeah,
now." Right? And it doesn't
mhm,
exist.
yeah. Or it's just like it doesn't it's just not possible, in the world in the rules that we have to follow right now, like they have to go to this school and do these things and these tests, and it doesn't matter that they're geniuses in this other specific way. They're not measuring up in all of these other ways that we're told they need to fit into. So I think yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
It doesn't what they need doesn't exist yet. And yeah, that's something that my sister and I have talked about a lot, like, oh, if only it was this way, they would be so happy, like if it, they would just be so relaxed, they wouldn't be so tense or anxious or whatever it is that they might be experiencing at the moment.
Yeah.
um Yeah, definitely important to hold space for that.
Mhm. Mhm.
You've developed a program called the Arc of Integration, and it's not a linear path to healing. You call it a spiral of remembering. Who could benefit the most from this type of work, and how does it promote deeper healing? And can you describe the program for us, please?
Sure. Yeah. So we are coming into a time where the ways in which we have abandoned ourselves to perform and show up as perfect and all of these ways that all of these requirements that used to be, not to say used to be on us because they still are, but we're coming into a time where people are going to start showing up more as themselves, and there's going to be a more and more push towards that. And the reason that I start by sharing that is the arc of integration is currently in the process of being created. So I started a podcast, a new podcast with my colleague Melinda, and it's called The Purple Couch. And I'm really excited about it. And we're going through each one of those stages in the arc of integration and giving really good examples to people doing deeper work and also clinicians. I've been a teacher of clinicians for many years. And it's funny because we will literally be like talking about it and something else will come up. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is getting created in real time. So this is not going to be the polished arc yet. But I'm really leaning into this whole just show up fully as yourself now. So I can tell you the stages. The stages of the arc of integration are fragmentation, adaptation, repetition, collapse, awakening, reintegration, and self-reclamation. And basically, this arc, who is it for? It's for anyone who is at a state of consciousness that they want to go on the journey of reintegrating these split off parts of self. Now, how do parts split off? So let's start at fragmentation. In fragmentation, there's two ways that we split off from ourselves, two primary ways. One of the ways is that there are certain times in our lives where we hear or believe that parts of ourselves are unacceptable, excuse me, in order to stay in connection or belonging. So what that means basically is if you hear you're too sensitive or you're too this, you're too much, you're not enough, etc., then we split off, we disown that part of self, right? Well, I'm not going to be the sensitive one anymore. And we kind of like put that one, not like in the total shadows, but it's kind of like over there on the shelf. So this is a way that we disown parts of self in order to stay in connection and belonging. The second way that we fragment is through trauma. So, experiences that happen in our lives that are too overwhelming for the nervous system to metabolize and integrate. And so, since that cycle doesn't complete itself, we wind up in that moment splitting off from parts of self. Now, I don't know how much I'll get into the depth of that here, but what I can say is like, what kinds of parts would you split off from then? Well, a lot of people don't know that they're split off from their own needs, for instance, right? They really feel like they can do anything, they'll be just fine, they just keep going. And so, actually recognizing that they had needs that once were completely cut off and put over in the shadows can be really shocking for people. Another way that we split off in those moments of trauma is we split off from whatever the experience is in the body in the moment that that traumatic incident is occurring. And so, a good example of that is if you're running from a tiger or you're running from a perpetrator and you're in a situation where you cannot fight and you cannot flight, right? So, the body will first go into fight or flight. And if that is not available to you, your body will then go into freeze, shut down, dorsal vagal state. why that's important. And one example of ways that we can split off from ourselves, and a very common way for those of us who have had any kind of violation trauma, is that, say, in that moment, you felt angry, or you should have felt, not maybe, I don't want to say should have, but what you deserve was to be incredibly angry with that tiger or with that perpetrator, right? And in the moment, anger was not available. Like, you could not be angry because you could have gotten hurt, or, your nervous system decided, no, instead we're gonna shut down. We're gonna go into dorsal vagal. We're gonna freeze. We're gonna play dead. That's how we're gonna get through this, right? And so that's just one example of, in that space. So the split then for that person in that situation, which so many of us as women have had this experience in one way or another, right? So the split then is, wow, like, in order to heal, you have to actually go back and reintegrate the anger, because the anger becomes something that just gets split off from awareness. The body doesn't get to actually finish the cycle of anger because it didn't have contact. It wasn't able to in that moment.
Right.
So I'm going into depth here, and I won't with the entire arc, but the intention is understanding, where did I split? Where did I lose parts of myself along the way? Are there disowned parts of myself that I have abandoned, I have disowned in order to stay in connection and belonging, right? Think about the ways that you show up in friendships. Maybe you're in, friendship, like maybe you're in a friendship that feels kind of like, oh, I don't know, that's not really how, like, that doesn't feel really good to me, but then you like won't tell your friend. It's like, okay, well, why? Because you're people pleasing in this moment. Why? Because you abandoned a part of yourself. You're abandoning yourself right now, right? When you're doing that. But
Yeah.
do that in order to stay in connection and belonging. We started
Right.
doing that at a very young age because you had to stay in connection and belonging in order to survive, right? Like, if I'm not connected to my caregiver, as an infant, you can die, right? So
Yeah.
we start disowning parts of ourselves in order to stay in connection and belonging. We fragment from parts of ourselves when we have traumatic experiences. And in order to go through that healing arc, in order to get to the place where you can reclaim yourself, where you can say, wow, I know who I am. I remember who I am. I know myself. I feel wholeness. I feel complete. You have to go back and understand where you fragmented in the first place. And the arc
Right.
kind of takes you through that journey.
It sounds like exactly the kind um, of thing that you would need, but you wouldn't know that you needed it unless somebody pointed it out to you, because you wouldn't even know that there were parts of you missing, right? Or that you had split
Well,
off parts of you.
yes, but people know because, I mean, it certainly, there's different levels of consciousness, right? But so when we are in the stage of repetition is when our patterns are showing up in our life. So I'll walk you through the arc just a little bit more. So fragmentation is where you fragment, right?
Mhm.
Adaptation is what comes next. So now the nervous system has to keep going. The nervous system has to survive, right? It's brilliant. It's sacred
Mhm.
intelligence. So the thing that you
Mhm.
don't like and you show up in therapy for, and you say like, "Oh, I really hate that I have this anxiety, or I don't like that I'm people pleasing in this relationship," or whatever it is. It's like, that's where the sacred intelligence comes in. It's like your nervous system came up with this beautiful way to keep you going, right? So
Mhm.
now we figured out how to keep you adapted, right? And adaptation is survival mode. To your point, most people don't know that they're living in survival mode. How do you know
Yeah.
that you're living in survival mode? You feel like something's missing. You feel like maybe you got to the top and you realize that it's lonely there. You
Mhm.
have it all together when you're at work, but then you come home and close the door and you're absolutely miserable. Like, if you feel like you're not thriving and things are not fully aligned and you're not feeling whole, I mean, not that you're gonna feel perfect anyways, but, like,
Mhm.
if you have a sense that, like, yeah, I do not live in wholeness, I do not live in peace, I do not live in integration, then
Right.
it does, yeah, maybe you don't know it's because you split, but, and once again, this arc actually is for people who are, more conscious, doing more conscious awareness work, but it's also specifically for therapists to take clients through.
Mm,
So we teach
okay.
people how to notice in your client where the splits are. So the client doesn't typically know.
I
They don't
see.
show up and say,
Right.
like, I know I need this necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this survival self, or the concept of um, living at, in survival mode, is that something that we take through multiple incarnations if we don't resolve that within, or if we're not even aware that we're not really living a whole life, that we're just living as a version of ourselves in order to survive? Is that something that shows up like that?
We may. I actually don't know if I know the answer to that question. I have to be honest and say, I don't know. I actually don't know if we were to. I can say that for sure, people do live in survival mode for their entire lives. And that
Mhm.
makes me feel kind of sad. You know,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of therapy takes clients from like people that are doing their work and they go see a therapist, right? A lot of therapy takes people from fragmentation. They might not call it that, but it's like, okay, where did the split occur? And if they're not calling it a split, they just say, okay, where did the bad thing happen? Right?
Yeah.
Where did the adverse experiences happen? And then it takes them into adaptation. It takes them into survival. Like it gives them
Mhm.
tools to cope and to make it through life, but we're not really thriving there.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why repetition comes next because it's like, okay, in repetition, that's where we start to really wake up. We're like, oh my gosh, why do I keep dating the same, unavailable person? Or like, why do I, keep reenacting this thing with my child or whatever it is? It's like
Mhm.
we wind up in these repetitive patterns. And those of us, and people can just stay stuck there, right? They can just stay stuck there. This is where people will, instead of looking at their partner as a mirror and say, wow, what is the pattern here that I'm meant to see like my part in? This is where people say, oh, it didn't work out and they break up, right?
Mhm.
Or it's a repetition is a really uncomfortable place to be because
Mhm.
that's a place where we are now repeating all of our patterns unconsciously, maybe coming into consciousness and collapse actually comes after that, which I think, and not everybody collapses, right? Like some people won't step into the unknown. Some people won't let things collapse or fall apart or surrender. I will say those of us doing deeper work, and I don't have an answer for this spiritually as to like why this is. From a depth psychology perspective, I could say, well, it's the process of transformation. Chaos and collapse are always part of the process of transformation, meaning, you've probably heard that trauma is a catalyst for growth and transformation, right? So there is meaning in pain. That pain will actually lead you to a deeper truth or a different part of yourself. So following that notion, that collapse, when people are doing deeper work, things do start to fall away in their lives, right? Things do start to
Mhm.
collapse. And actually, I do know the reason for one reason for that, like why that does happen. And it's because we're shifting consciousness,
Mhm.
right? Shifting from one state of
Yeah.
consciousness to a new state of consciousness. And now everything that I built from this one state of consciousness no longer aligns with where I'm
Yeah.
going. But as you know, and your listeners are people that are probably, doing more conscious work. It's like this all makes sense, right? Like we can hold this and say like, oh yeah, I remember when, I lost my job or I lost a loved one or I got a divorce or whatever it was, and how that was actually the greatest catalyst for this great change in my life, right?
Mhm.
But that's a more conscious audience, right? So many people don't choose that path and they stay in that survival mode and they keep
Right.
repeating those patterns.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's the opportunities that you find when you're kind of like at the bottom
Yes.
that sometimes surprise you. That's
Mhm.
definitely been my experience. There had to be, um, you know, everything had to fall apart for me
Yeah.
to figure out where to go next, and I'm grateful for it. I'm absolutely grateful for it. So Yeah, I think there's so much good that comes out of these difficult experiences.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that's what's really
yeah.
exciting to me about this arc too, is there's a stage in there called awakening. And,
Mm,
like, yes, of course, people, especially your audience, knows what awakening means or has heard of it before, but I love that, like, this is, coming back to that, like, science and soul, right? It's like my intention, like one of my soul purposes is like I'm very much a bridge for people. It's like, well, how do you make this
mhm,
accessible for everybody, right? You don't have to like go to a fancy holistic therapist in order to like do this. If I can help people find a way to bring them through this process without it feeling like it's only available for those who are more conscious.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about your experiences with the spiritual side of things? Because you have had some experiences where you've traveled in non-physical spaces or met non-physical entities. You had a really beautiful and meaningful experience with your father the night that he passed. Can you tell us more about those experiences and how they've helped shape your understanding of consciousness and um, our experience here in this life?
Yeah. Well, I always was somebody who, from a very young age, felt attuned to God or whatever that meant, but I didn't know what that meant. That's how I held it when I was
Mhm,
younger. Um, I was raised Catholic, kind of. I mean, I say that, but I'm like, I don't know how much like we actually fully did that. I should be careful saying that, but but so I wouldn't say like I was like a Catholic who then, turned away from that.
mhm,
But so I always had a connection to spirit, we could say. But I do remember being in like my 20s and like going through stuff and literally being like, okay, God, like I know it's like on my list to like figure out what, God is and my own spirituality and whatever. And I'm really busy right now. But if you could just help me with this thing, whenever like things would hit the fan, right? Like it would be like, okay, like
mhm,
that's when I would turn towards, God. So I would say that my own spirituality really opened up, just like you're saying, in a state of collapse.
mhm,
I've had an experience literally where, I mean, it's like a movie, right? I'm driving my car, everything in my life is falling apart. Like my uncle just passed away, my then husband is cheating on me, and like he's like in Santa Cruz with his mistress blowing the entire bank account. Like I forget all the things that were happening at the time, but I was younger, and that was my life, that was my the realm that I was in then. And I'm
mm,
driving the car, and because I'm trying to like run away, and like I forget where I was going, but either way, I'm driving the car and it's pouring rain, and I have like this little convertible. So all the rain's just like drenching me while I'm, you know,
like a
driving. And
movie.
yeah, it is. It is. And then these cars are stopped in front of me. And so I have to stop my car, and I can't stop. My nervous system cannot stop. I'm in flight. Right. So then I'm
Yeah,
like, so then I get out of the car, I stand on the side of the road, and I just start screaming at the sky. What do you
yeah,
want from me? Like, what do you want from me? And this, mind you, was after a good year of me turning towards that trauma and truly doing the work to heal and integrate. So I went through my own period of like having post traumatic symptoms. Like it had just been a rocky road.
mm,
So I'm screaming at the sky, and I hear this word, like literally audibly hear this word. And the word is Bayside. In my book, I actually called it Lakeside, so we'll do that. And
mm,
I hear this word, and I'm so pissed off at the sky. Like I'm so mad. Like I literally just heard like God talk or whatever. I don't know what that is yet, right? But I'm like so
mm,
angry that I'm like, whatever, get back in my car, continue on my drive, take a wrong turn, and I wind up at this ginormous church called Bayside. And
Oh.
so I drive in, I'm like, all right, fine. Like, fine, I'm here, and I back my little convertible in and I park my car and I get out, and I didn't do this intentionally. I get out and there's a sign right behind the spot that I parked in. It says, "Welcome home, God." So
Oh.
the story continues to get, weirder. I go inside and like the band Journey, like the guy Lincoln Brewster from Journey is like playing in the auditorium that I'm like trying to find my way in, because I'm like, I'm supposed to be talking to somebody here, obviously. So that was
Right.
the beginning. That was the beginning, I think, of me being like, all right, fine. I'm coming home. Like I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna pay attention. It did happen. The catalyst, if you will, was a church. It was a Christian church. And I remember I went for 3 months and I loved the music. I mean, first off, they had very
Mm.
good musicians, but it was like one of those, like,
Yeah.
huge stages where they had all the beautiful effects. You felt like you were at a concert, right? These gorgeous voices and hundreds of people. And I remember just being in that room and feeling the energy in that room and just being like, you know what, even if I might not believe the same exact thing that you do, like, we're all here and we're all connected for the same reason. And I remember just
Mm.
really feeling into that consciousness, and that was the beginning of a deeply, deeply spiritual journey. It was my awakening. So that's the
Mhm.
story that comes through today. Of course, there's hundreds of others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I definitely resonate with that when you just at a point where you drop everything and then you say like, what do you want from me?
What do you
What
want?
what
Yeah.
more can I give you?
Yep.
And then you hear something and then there's the either you step forward and you see where it leads you and you let it take you down that path and open things up for you, or you have always the choice to turn away from that and be like, I didn't hear anything.
Sure, sure. And then the knock
Yeah.
gets louder, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I've heard if you don't listen to the nudges, you get the knock. If you don't listen to the knock, you get the hammer, something like that.
Okay. I haven't heard that, but I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you that I've heard it in the context of your body will tell you when there's something wrong, and it'll tell you in small subtle ways at first, and if you don't pay attention, then it will use pain to talk to you because
Yeah.
it knows that that's what you'll listen to because that's what gets your attention.
Yeah.
So that's the context I've heard it in, um, personally, but yeah, it's you always have the
Some
option to say no.
yeah. Something that's coming in right now, so I just want to share this too, is this is where healing and it really goes with your question you just asked. This is where healing and spirituality started coming together for me too, because I realized that the more that I healed, the more that my spiritual journey opened up. And
Mm,
that started to become a truth that I started to really bring into my work with clients. And I've seen it time and time again. So I never push it on anybody. But my belief is that when you're doing your work, when you're doing your deeper work, and you really are saying, like, okay, what are the things, like you're saying, right? What's calling to me? What is coming up? How am I getting this information? It brings us not only into our own healing, but it starts to bring us into our wholeness, which is our connection spiritually. And so
mm,
that's when the bridge started to really, really happen for me. Like, it was like, these are not separate, right? Once
yeah.
coming back to that split, I see everything like through splits and reintegration. Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm seeing it as like a kaleidoscope. Like the
Mhm.
picture keeps changing, but you have all the same pieces that you're working with, right? And you just have
Yes.
to keep rearranging them.
Yes. Yes.
So that
Nobody
makes
is
sense.
nobody is broken, right? And when I say fragmented, it's like you're not really fragmented, right? Like, as a soul, you're not really fragmented. Like, you're perfectly fine the way
Mhm.
that you are. But as
Yeah.
human on this journey, as a soul on a human journey in a human body, having a human experience, fragmentation really means that there's parts that we're not conscious of. There's parts that
Mm-hmm.
are always bringing us home to ourself, right? Like if you follow that narrative that like everything in your life is always a reflection of you and bringing you back to yourself, then it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense that we go along on this journey and we have all these experiences that are trying to awaken or bring back into consciousness parts of ourselves. So like
Yeah.
your kaleidoscope visual, I love that. And the image that I love so much is stained glass,
Mm.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's like all those pieces come together and they create this whole, and the whole is so beautiful. That's one of the things I really want people to hear is like everybody's story, everybody's unique individual path is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that people are living, I know that people are living in fragmentation. They're living in these ways where it's like, yeah, the whole picture is there, but you can't see it. So how do we start taking these pieces and putting them back into place so that you can be whole and complete and you can see the beauty of your own life?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I wanted to ask you for our final question. If there's somebody who's been putting in the work, who has been who wants to evolve their consciousness, who wants to heal their patterns of behavior that are affecting them negatively, and they've been putting in the work, and they still feel um, that, or they feel like Sisyphus rolling that boulder up the hill, and it rolls back down at the end of every day, and you just got to keep doing it over and over again, despite all of the effort that someone has been putting in genuinely. What's the first thing, or the next step that you would advise for them to take? What's the first thing for them to do as the next step on their journey?
Sure. So closing my eyes here just for a moment and listening to an intuitive information, because there's, it's so unique to each individual. But what comes through just really clearly is like, well, what does the soul want? What's happening
Mm,
on a deeper level? And so I think that really depends. And it's a very real question and concern. I think that so many people are there, right? Where they're like, okay,
mm,
I'm doing it, like I'm putting in the work, like why isn't this changing? And the answer, not always, but often, is because potentially maybe they're working with somebody without bringing in like the entire like holistic approach. For instance, we need to work with the body. And it's
mhm,
really good for people to hear that too, if the work that you're doing is very spiritual based and it's not embodied. Like it's so important for us to understand that like being integrated and doing our healing work and coming into wholeness, it is actually being grounded right here in this body. And a lot of people bypass that. A lot of people are doing, more of the work that brings you into ascension, but we're meant to ascend with 2 feet on the ground. And that's
yeah,
where we come back to that, sacred nervous system. And that's where I think that really started coming through for me, because
mhm,
I'm somebody that likes to flight. Like I didn't want to be embodied either.
yeah,
But my daughter brought me right into my body, right into my,
right,
right. There was no escaping what was happening in my nervous system with that child.
mhm, right,
So for me, I'm just trusting right now because I feel like there's so many different answers to that. Like I feel like I'd have to sit with the individual to know like what it is that they need specifically that's missing. Um,
mhm,
but but instead I'm just reaching into the ethers and saying like, okay, like what comes through in regards to what you're asking. And so that's what's really coming through strongly. So I'm just going to trust that for ourselves and our audience, that it's like, just remember that we're meant to really embody this work. And so if you're not bringing in mind, body, and soul, and don't forget about body, then that's
right,
part of the process. And I will say this too, because this is coming as well. A lot of the work like if I had to like sum it down to like the most simplistic answer, which is kind of shocking to me because I've been on this journey myself, is there are so many ways that we are abandoning ourselves. So many ways that we are not even conscious of. And so, if you can start doing the deeper work around what is happening in my body right now, right? When you're sitting with somebody that's activating for you, or you're in a situation and you feel something in your system, that's when we're meant to listen. That's when we're meant to get really good information because something is happening. And that's part of your journey too. And when we don't turn towards that, we're abandoning ourselves. We're
Mhm.
abandoning that. And that's why we have so many problems. But healing and consciousness, all of it, right? It's all so profound and it's also all so simple. It's
Mhm.
both. So that's how that one feels to me. Abandonment of self feels like so simple, like duh. Why don't we just listen to ourselves? But it's not that simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, those listening to your intuition, trusting when you feel like your boundaries are being crossed and you don't want to be impolite, so you just kind of like be uncomfortable, recognizing when those kinds of things are happening and being able to speak up for yourself, even though you are trying to be a loving person, sometimes you need to draw those boundaries, right? And I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah. And like I think if I tried to give you like a big example of it, like one of the ways that we're really unconscious of it is like look at the areas of your life that are chaotic. And even though they
Mm,
feel like total chaos and out of control and just like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me, it's okay, but where are you not telling the truth? Where are
mhm,
you not telling the truth? Because just like trauma is a catalyst for transformation, I believe that chaos is a catalyst, it's a pathway to truth. And truth
mhm.
is always around, well, if I'm not telling the truth, then where am I leaving myself behind?
And when you say, "Am I not telling the truth?" you mean, am I telling the truth to myself? Like, am
Yes,
I being honest with myself, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about connecting with your body is absolutely perfect, and especially for the audience of Consciousness Hub, because there's so much of the consciousness exploration that we try to do or try to learn involves going out of body or having an out of body experience or shifting reality frames in some way
Mhm,
to be able to communicate with the non-physical. There's so much that that goes into like, oh, let's try and try and try to go into the non-physical to be able to experience these wonderful things that we might forget that we need to get out of our minds and into our bodies
mhm.
to really to have this experience fully. And actually that makes it easier for you to connect with your spirit when you actually feel like you're in your body. And that's what I've found with my experience, and it seems like that's what you have found as well.
Absolutely. There was a time where I didn't really understand what that meant, but yes, absolutely. Now, I feel like that's part of it's another leg of the journey, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you are working on publishing a book at some
Mhm.
point coming up
Mhm.
as well.
Yes.
If you'd like to say anything about that, please go ahead.
Sure. So this book is called The Art of Chaos, and
Mhm.
it is a memoir that journeys through a lot of what we've talked about today as far as like how is the past threading through into the present. And I've written it from the perspective of mother, right? So what's coming up in
Mhm.
my body and where did that come from? Is a
Mhm.
lot about what the book's about, but overall, it really is about depth psychology. What does the soul want? How do we take these fragmented pieces of self and create an entire narrative, an entire story? And the
Mhm.
art of chaos is because my own experience through that book, it's a lived experience journey. So my own
Mhm.
experience was incredibly chaotic. I mean, the things
Mhm.
that were given to me in order to write this book were profoundly difficult. And the truth that I'm sharing here today, about, okay, where are you? Like what is the truth that is not fully conscious is what lies underneath that chaos. This is the
Mhm.
origin story of that journey.
Mhm.
So I'm very, very excited about it. Hopefully we'll see it out next year, but yes, I'm in the publishing process. And I also want to share, I have a nonprofit called Sacred Path Holistic Therapy. And
Mhm.
so we have about 30, 35 practitioners now who are training and are trained by me and my staff to work in this way. So if this is something that is, drawing somebody in, that can be a resource as well.
Wonderful. And can you share your social media or website address with us as well in case anyone would like to take a deeper dive?
Absolutely. So, social media, gosh, we have a lot of platforms now, but I'm going to give you Instagram. So, at Dr. Nicole Dolan. And my website is drnicoledolan.com. And I
Mhm.
do offer these sacred architect sessions right now, which I'm really excited about, which we go into, one's story. Sometimes people want to start right where they're at, which is totally fine. But typically, we're going into the past. We're tracking nervous system imprints, like where did you learn to shrink, to,
Mhm.
overfunction, et cetera, and how is that
Mhm.
showing up in your life today, and how can we actually thread through that healing journey into your own spiritual journey, like your purpose here and what it is that you're meant to maybe see that you're not.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Sounds like really powerful work that would really get into the deepest parts of you. So that sounds
Yeah.
cool. Well, wonderful. I look forward to reading your book when it's out, and I will definitely be checking out your website and sharing all of this cool information with other people because I've never met a therapist like you. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Grateful to be here today.
Thank you.